Welcome to Trailer Rewind. Every month we dig into the archives and view a film that Pete and Andy talked about in their trailer picks on the Mothership. JJ and I watch it and have a very spoilery conversation about it. Today, for our very special Valentine's Day episode, we're looking at The Lobster. This was Pete's pick from September 4th, 2015.
Have you ever been on your own before?
No, never.
Your last relationship lasted how many years?
Around 12.
Sexual preference?
Women. Is there a bisexual option available?
No, sir, this option is no longer available. And the dog?
My brother, he was here a couple of years ago, but he didn't make it.
Did you read the leaflet?
Yes, I did.
As you understand from your brother's experience, if you fail to fall in love with someone during your stay here, you'll turn into an animal.
Have you ever danced with anybody?
Yes.
As an animal, you'll have a second chance to find a companion.
Pete said that it looked to fit in the same vein as the Spike Jonze movie Her, which is a near future. Yeah, he said it's this near future sci-fi where things have something's gone slightly different. So sort of taking reality, sort of shifting it a little. So then he read the log line, and he and Andy just sort of cracked up about speculating about taking that into a meeting and what studio executive or investor, what their possible responses might be to this log line. But he said in the trailer that interview scene where David first gets to the hotel and they're asking him all the questions, just was really got him hook, line, and sinker with the concept of this film. And then Andy sort of went off on how much he just enjoyed the names of the characters: the limping man, biscuit woman, the lisping man, nosebleed woman, heartless woman. Mm-hmm. And they were just both very enthusiastic about something that sounded so completely different.
It is so completely different. That is a great way to describe this movie right up in front. I've been trying to describe, because I've been talking about the fact that we're to people that we're going to talk about this, and most people haven't seen it. And I've been trying to explain what it is. And it kind of sounds vaguely like the Twilight Zone or something. I think it's interesting that they thought it was in the same vein as Her. I mean, it is a near future sci-fi, but other than that, there's not a whole lot of similarity there.
So, keeping with sort of the theme of the movie, were you able to commit to a relationship with this film, or you were in danger of becoming an animal?
Well, I guess it depends how you define a relationship, because I think that's really what this movie's about. I really, really like this movie, and I actually went out and saw it in the theater on release with my wife. I think that's the last movie that we saw together, which everybody should kind of get a chuckle at, that you know me and my wife. But no, I think it's a fantastic movie, and it's very complex, and it's such a thinking film. I've talked about on our podcast before that the thing that I enjoy most about movies and music and all art is when I can be moved emotionally. And now that's not something that necessarily happened to me in this movie. This movie is really sophisticated in the way that it's devoid of emotion, and in a different way. It forced me to think, and it forced me to challenge my beliefs, and that's why I loved it. I didn't get pushed emotionally here, but I got pushed mentally, and I really liked it. So if that's a relationship, then that's something I can commit to.
So how many times have you seen this film?
This is my second. So I saw it once in the theater, and then I reviewed it for us to talk about tonight.
Okay, so me too. I saw it earlier this summer, and then I just saw it again, to prep for tonight. And what I found was the first watch of this is, for me at least, was really challenging, and it really demands patience from the audience, because it does not go out of its way to explain anything that's going on.
Right.
It moves along. But the second viewing, now that you know so many of the things, there are scenes that you get so much pleasure out of watching them, because you understand and appreciate what's really going on. In some of these scenes, you sort of understand the context or where this is going. And to me, that it was enjoyable the first time because it's so different. But on the second view, it's still enjoyable, even though you know a lot more. To me, I think it just is a great film that is going to continually reward an audience each time you come back to it. There's so many layers to it, and I think there's such simplicity to it, but also such complexity to it as well.
Yeah, I think the layers are really interesting that you talk about there. And the interesting thing about the two viewings, now I didn't feel differently in both times, but I can see there are probably a lot of people that are normal audience members of movies that might get that sort of confused feeling when they see it the first time, and confusion usually gets people to be cross or upset in some way. Whereas you come to it the second time, that those things that may have confused you or at least gave you the thought of like, what the heck is going on here, that you're watching it and you can take it a little bit more comically, I think. And so you can appreciate it and consider it in a different way the second time viewing it. So I would encourage people to watch it twice too, but I loved it the first time. I really felt like it was a huge poetic metaphor for everything. And it's just like, it was, you talk about those layers. It was like multiple, it was a candy bar. It was multiple candy bars wrapped in multiple layers for me, because every time I had a new revelation about what I was seeing, it was just so exciting and interesting to test the metaphor and try to play through everything in my mind about what the movie was really trying to say.
So I think the best way to sort of get into this is to really look at the structure and script, because I mean, it's when everybody talks about this, they talk about the story, that it's so different, just how this film works. So I think to me that it's sort of the natural place to leap in is to just start with, what is this story? What is this world that we're being presented with? And this film has also been Oscar nominated for Best Original Screenplay, and it was written by the director Yorgos Lanthimos and then his writing partner, because they've collaborated on several films. And I'm gonna butcher this as well. I'm not fluent in Greek. Efthimis Philippou.
I think you did
Philippou.
Great. I think that sounds awesome.
They've also were nominated for Best Foreign Film, their film Dogtooth several years ago, and then which had until recently been on Netflix and had been on my list of things to see, but I had heard that it was a dark and somewhat disturbing film, so it was something that was sort of on that Netflix list of when I'm in the right mood, maybe I'll get around to watching that.
Yeah.
And they also have another film called Alps that I had just recently come to my attention, and I forget the context exactly, but it's another. I mean, hearing these films described, they seem very similar to The Lobster, and it's a really different sort of story. Dogtooth is about, at least as I recall, two girls that are sort of confined to the house by their parents until they lose their dog tooth, which I don't know what that means.
No, neither do I.
And then Alps has to do with the grieving process, which made me think of you and our discussion of Demolition, of a company that basically helps people through the grieving process by sort of recreating those situations from their life, so they will sort of role play, I guess, these people from their lives to help them through the grieving process.
Weird.
Yes, so that's Alps.
And that sounds like the whole Black Mirror thing. Have you seen the Black Mirror episode where they recreate the person based on social media?
Yes.
Oh
yes.
Horrifying.
Oh, yes.
Horrifying. Yeah, so I should check out Alps too. That sounds really interesting.
Yes. So I think, hearing I'm interested to see his other films because they sound similar in tone, I guess, of something that's slightly off that gets you to think about things. So I think apparently he's hit his stride, I think, with The Lobster, and this was the first, I think, English language film, so it exposed him to a much broader audience. But why don't you sort of just take us through sort of the basics of The Lobster?
Well, I think it's really interesting that they talk about the other films as dark, because I in trying to explain it to people who haven't seen it, I've used the word intense. I've used the word intense and weird and thought-provoking. I think those are the words that I use to describe it. I like talking about it more like it's off rather than dark, because it definitely makes you feel like there's something different. So I was super captivated by this story because I was really sort of in this mode that everything we're being presented with is metaphor in some way or another, and it challenged me to think about how I approach relationships and how I interact in my relationships and what I think is the right thing versus what I might be experiencing in life. Because I think that's really the sort of basis for the story. And it uses this sort of framing structure. So it's got a first act where it slams you into, again, you mentioned before that they don't really have any exposition in this movie, which I am a huge fan of doing it this way. It is very much show and very little tell. And I think it does it in a way that is pretty masterful. among all movies that I've seen, because it is so off that you would assume that there would need to be some level of exposition, but it does it perfectly in dialogue and what you're showing. So it smashes you into this hotel where people check in as their relationships have fizzled, because in this dystopian world, and maybe that's not even appropriate to call it, this sort of near future sci-fi aspect, it is law that you have to have a partner to be an effective member of society. So people check into this hotel where they are tasked with partnering up with someone that has some similar quality to them. That's where you get those clever names of Biscuit Woman. They unfortunately didn't find anyone. They didn't find a Biscuit Man, but I think it's really that's a really interesting thing. If you say, "What's your defining characteristic?" That's a line that they used multiple times in the film, and you have to decide on your defining characteristic, and that is the thing that you need to pair with someone. And then it goes through all these really amazing ideas and metaphors for what people will do to try and alter themselves to create that defining characteristic that will bond them with someone else. And in this world, in the world of the Lobster, they have to, because if they don't, they're turned into an animal. In this hotel, they have a limited amount of time to do it. And I don't know, I don't really need to go through the synopsis of it. I'm just being tickled like talking about the movie because I love the story, and there's so much more to it. I mean, you have the hunters and you have the hunt, and they're tranquilizing people as they turn them into animals, and these slow motion hunts, and then then you have Act 2, where our main character, played by Colin Farrell, David, escapes from the hotel through a massive and really sort of gruesome episode, escapes and then aligns himself with the fugitive single people, and how they are equally as militant as the coupled up people about maintaining their singlehood. It's such an interesting thing. And then all the trappings that come with those beliefs and putting it into this really sort of tangible law structure of this futuristic, or I don't even think you can call it futuristic. I think it's just this different universe where you need to be one way or the other. I think it was just brilliant, and I loved it. What else would you want to talk about in terms of that?
Well, I'd say what's interesting is that each of the worlds has their own sort of strict rules of how they sort of reinforce or support their worldview. Because even in the hotel where everybody is tasked with this mission of finding a partner, they're continuously being indoctrinated with why being a couple is better than being single. The wait staff act out little scenes of what it's like for a woman to be walking down the street alone and the horrible things that happen to her versus if she's walking with a man.
Right.
Or if you're alone eating dinner, it's very possible you can choke and die. However, if you're eating dinner with someone else, they can perform the Heimlich maneuver on you to save you. So hence the perils of being alone versus the safety
life and death
of being a couple.
It's life and death.
And then in the woods, where you've got sort of the loners, they have their music. They dance alone, which is why they only listen to electronic music, because you can't dance together with someone. You have to dance alone, and you have to go find you have to dig your own grave.
Yes,
you're responsible for digging your own grave, and it to me the partnership almost is a betrayal there.
Yep.
That isolation is preferable, and just the.
Well, and then
contrast.
The irony of it, and you think about the through line that they're talking about, who we are as people as we go through the world trying to find a partner, and then we give up. David gives up. He tried, he failed miserably and gruesomely. He lost his brother due to the woman that he chose kicking him to death. I mean, it's just, and then he decides to be single, and just after he decides to be single, he finally finds the woman that's actually the perfect match for him.
Yes.
What a statement about life, and done so poetically and darkly, and so it's so interesting. It's a terribly interesting movie.
So that's where David meets the short-sighted woman.
Yes. Rachel Weisz,
who we discover is also the narrator of this story, because we are introduced at the very beginning. There's this voiceover narration that leads us through the first part of the film, and it's this disembodied voice, it's this outside narrator, but it's not until she's introduced to us as one of the loners in the woods that we realize she is the one narrating the story. And I think the one thing that we glossed over is that throughout this entire film, every line of dialogue is delivered so like deadpan and devoid of emotion. It's
from
not
everyone,
robotic.
from literally everyone in the film.
Yes, exactly. And it to me it's comical because of just the absurdity of some of the situations. And there's so many great lines of dialogue in this film that on their own wouldn't, merit any notice, but just the delivery of them, when the hotel manager says, well, if you encounter any problems you cannot resolve yourselves, you will be assigned children. That usually helps.
Right.
And it's just, I'm watching this with my wife and she looks at me and she's like, no, that never helps.
Exactly. But people do it. That's the point. But people do that. Yes, I mean, in history, that's always been hey, our relationship is failing. Why don't we try to have a kid? And that's going to make it'll fix everything. No.
So, yes. So it's the story, it's that social commentary, but with this deadpan delivery, which for me, as I thought about it, I don't know if it was, I'm trying to think of the function of that framing structure of having this narrator.
Of the deadpan aspect of it?
Of the deadpan, because I thought, is it, and I'm probably getting way too meta with this, but if I tell you a story, and I'm telling you a story, and I'm not a terribly good storyteller, you're envisioning this in your head. If I don't give you all the details, it may come across just like what we see in this movie, where you've got characters that are saying lines of dialogue, but if I don't tell you or give you any sense of the emotion, that's what you're sort of left with.
Yeah.
We have an emotionless narrator telling us a story devoid of emotion, which may explain why everything is so...
And this dialogue is so clever.
Yeah.
That it features it in a way that you wouldn't expect from deadpan. I hadn't considered that question even until right now. But you think that if they were to infuse this movie with some sort of emotion, that it would end up like what's the name of the big institution in the Hunger Games movies? That it would all be those people that are these caricatures, right? Is it what is it called?
The Capitol.
The Capitol.
Yeah, the Capitol.
They'd all be people from the Capitol because it's such an odd way for them to be. That following this dialogue, that if you really were emoting at the same time of it, I don't know that you could carry it across. It wouldn't be as good. I don't think. It's really features the dialogue in a way of, I don't know. This is the thing you're pointing at, and again, it's used to tell the story in a way that they don't have long speeches of exposition. You're learning the rules, you're learning the mythology as they interact, and you're learning about the characters too. And I think it's such a smart script for that reason.
So it's challenging to talk about the performances then,
right?
Because everything is so flat and deadpan. But I think it was interesting to look at Colin Farrell playing David, who is sort of just your typical 40-something, 30-something guy who's, now single. He's in a relationship. We see early on his wife, I think when we're first introduced to him, it's, we're seeing him as his wife's leaving him.
Right.
And I think the question he asks is if the man she's leaving him for wears contacts or eyeglasses. Which is
same as him.
Yes. Yes, exactly. But, so he's not your typical, romantic lead. He's not an action hero. It's Colin Farrell sort of playing against type. He's not a guy where things go his way in this film, which I thought was an interesting choice. And I thought it just worked really well. And I think added to the humor of the film to see someone that typically plays those leading man roles to sort of be the victim to such violence from women,
right?
Throughout the film,
yes.
Particularly the heartless woman,
right? Literally heartless woman.
Yes. Yes.
I think I agree, and I think I believed that Colin Farrell was underrated before I saw this movie. From movies like In Bruges and a lot of things where he really does make some emotional connections. I think he's seen because he's kind of seen as a pretty boy that he doesn't have depth as an actor, and I just disagree. I loved him in this role, and I do agree that he's playing against type here, and he does it perfect, as well as everyone else here. I mean, John C. Reilly not playing against type, but does it exactly how the character needs to be done, and Rachel Weisz was great too. Everyone really bought in to the weight of this film in their performances because you have to do that deadpan piece, and I just thought it was perfect. It felt like it was exactly what they wanted.
Oh yeah, and then you've got Ben Whishaw as the limping man, who is sort of. We have the sort of the three amigos there at the beginning with David and the limping man, and John C. Reilly as the lisping man, as these three gentlemen that sort of bond together and to support each other through their quest to find partners. And finally, when the limping man, I guess, sort of betrays his defining characteristic to pursue the woman who gets nosebleeds.
Yes.
By continuously banging his face or head into objects to make his nose bleed. When he has an outburst, talking about the choices that the lisping man and David have made for their animals.
Right.
I thought was just it's hilarious that the lisping man is choosing to be a parrot.
Right. So that it can speak.
So that it can speak. And but I thought about that, and I was looking at him, and I'm like, where have I seen this actor before? And I had to look him up because I'm like, the limping man is a really crucial, I think, role in that first part in the hotel. Everything really, everything that David's doing sort of intertwines with what's going on. Even when he gets over to the loners in the woods, they come back on a mission to sort of subvert what's going on in the hotel. And David asked specifically to be tasked with dealing with the limping man. Right. But I was trying to place Ben Whishaw, and I realized for me he's the quintessential British millennial, that guy.
Sure.
Because I forgot he was Q in the new, in the James Bond reboots, and I'm looking at his IMDb listing, and he's just been in a slew of things, and I go, oh yeah, I've seen that, and I've seen that. He was the voice of Paddington.
Really?
Yes. So, he was in Cloud Atlas. I mean, he's all over the place, I thought, but either he immerses himself in a role so much that I don't notice, or that's just these roles where he's not that standout lead. He really blends into that character, just a really solid character actor.
Yep.
And it just reminded me of someone to keep an eye on, because I thought it was a compelling performance from him.
Oh yes,
what he has to do here.
Yeah, no, he did a fantastic job, and I think interestingly, you're reminding me of as he's confronted with the facade that he's built to make his defining characteristic for the woman that he wants to be with. I think it's really interesting. One of my favorite things about this movie is how well they use slaps of people to stop them talking and to say. And to end whatever sort of intent was meant by the scene. It happens regularly, and it's really well placed every time. So and he's part of that. I mean, his portrayal of sacrifice to achieve romantic partnership, it was perfect.
So now that we've got those three men, we talked about Rachel Weisz as the short-sighted woman narrator who sort of David develops a relationship with her, but we also have his first relationship, which is with the heartless woman, which David chooses to align himself with the heartless woman. She is the ruthless survivor of the hotel. When they go out on the hunt, for each person they bring back, they gain extra days on their time. And I think we see everybody starts with 45 days. She's up somewhere around 120 days by the time David's there. So she's been there a while to accrue, that much excess.
She adds 4 at least in each hunt.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. So he quickly realizes, here's somebody that's really strong, perhaps to align with her. And she's a very interesting character to see how she responds to his attempts to, I guess, woo her.
Right.
When she takes a drink from the martini and swallows the olive and starts choking and he does nothing. And then you realize she was testing him to see if he was going to be compassionate or not. And when he refuses to do anything,
I think we are a match.
Yes.
Yeah. And it just leads me to the question, why? I mean, honestly, but not why for the movie, but why do we do this to ourselves in life? Why do we think that partnering up is the most necessary thing? In this movie, they're doing it because it's the law. They'll be turned into an animal. And they actually explain that the reason why we turn you into an animal is so that you have a second chance to find an animal just like you.
Yes.
Because what were their examples? Because a camel could never be with a rhinoceros or something like, I mean, just ridiculous things. So, yeah, just
yes. That would be absurd.
That would be absurd,
yes.
Of course. But we're going to turn you into an animal because, we want to give you a second chance. I think it's interesting that we think why, and you think of these two characters, right? So you think of David and you think of the heartless woman, and even though David's kind of, honestly just going through the motions with the mythology the whole way through, and he's learning the mythology with us as an audience member. But you think of the heartless woman, and why does she, in addition to everyone else, feel that she needs to partner up? Because she equally does. She buys into, she doesn't need to. She's got as many days as she wants. She can keep shooting people and turning them into animals. But when she finds someone who is as discompassionate as she is, dispassionate rather, she says, I think we're a match, and she's going for it too. Why? Why do we do that as humans? Why do we think we have to be in this hotel? Why do we think we're confined to it? It's just these kind of questions. If you like questioning your belief structure about the way we're meant to do things, this movie is so great. And that heartless woman, it was a key point in that for me.
Well, and her counterpart, I think, in the loner leader in the woods, who I think is, you can ask yourself if she is just as heartless in her sort of dictatorial reign over the community in the woods of how she enforces things. And when she learns of David and the short-sighted woman's betrayal of taking the short-sighted woman into the city to tell her she's going to have her vision fixed, and then ultimately blinding her, having her blinded, and then the game she plays with her after, where she basically uses a third party to sort of fake her own death.
Oh yeah. Yeah,
by having this short-sighted woman, attack her with a knife and then pushing someone else in front of her,
right?
So that and then falling to the ground alongside the woman that's dying, so that she will think that she's dead,
right?
And then revealing, no, she's not, and I'm just going to leave you here. Oh, brutal.
Yes,
but again, in the name of protecting that realm of, it's important that everybody is single. And that's the most important thing.
She's heartless with a cause.
Yes.
Yeah, just really amazing characters, and just to see that they are metaphors for people that exist in life, but they're caricatures, right? So they're caricatures of people who exist in life. But I've met these people who are that militant about singledom, I've met these people that are that desperate about partnering up, and it's so interesting, such an interesting take on that whole concept. To put it into this really sort of creative film.
Yeah, I mean, it's a compelling story. As you said, it's going to get you to ask questions, and it's a heavy topic to think about. And the great thing about this film, I'm going to get into cinematography here, is as it gives you time to think about those things, while it's just, I think, entertaining you with just some amazing visuals.
It's gorgeous. The whole thing is gorgeous. It's so well shot, and there's so much space. I mean, and that's one of the things about the deadpan dialogue too. The pictures always create space for you to fill up with what you're seeing visually, and the dialogue always gives you the space to insert your thoughts. I mean, it's just it's kind of perfect in terms of cinematography in my mind. I had so many favorite shots that I can't even pick one for this conversation.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's the slow motion sequences. The one that was the most striking to me on first view was the hunt, when they're shooting the darts, and you see those darts in slow motion just sailing through the air, lodging themselves in trees or people, and just that combined with the score,
right?
I think just the images and music working together just beautifully in so many moments.
It was over and above what was needed to show the beauty of it, right? So they bring you into that slow-mo with that classical music, and you're like, oh, this is great. Like, this is kind of comic, and this is really beautiful. And then it just stays, and it lingers, and it shows the entire thing. And then they shoot the darts, and you see the slow-mo darts go, and you see them hit, and they do everything. The effect is complete. They're very comprehensive in the way that they approach the art of cinematography and the art of this film altogether.
We could probably just go through shot by shot talking about but I just want to get to where we need to get to next in our discussion and keep it moving along. But I think that's the thing that will get people, will keep people viewing the film. It's just the beauty of this. Of you may be confused, you may wonder where it's going, but know that you can just let the framing of the shots and the visuals just sort of wash over you and absorb this film. Let the music wash over you, which as I looked into it, I saw is, I think, almost all existing pieces of music. I didn't see if there was I couldn't find anything about any original compositions with this. I think it was all sort of pieced together from existing pieces of music.
Even those like slamming things when it was like dun 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 dun, even that was pulled from somewhere. No, that had to be original. But it was more an effect, really, even than music.
Right? Yeah. Well, right. And I think that's. I'll dig into that. I may have to send you some pieces of music, but I think so. There may be, yes, that may be sound effects as opposed to score.
Right.
But I'll take a look, because there's some pieces here I think you may be surprised.
Interesting
about.
Okay, cool. So, you mentioned that it was nominated for original screenplay. Did it have any cinematography? Probably not. It's probably not big enough to get a cinematography Oscar, is it?
I don't recall it. I think the only thing it got nominated for was screenplay, which
totally deserving.
Talk about original.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, there's nothing like it.
Right.
So we usually talk about first shot, last shot, and with this one, I feel like there's already so much going on that this film is telling us visually that I thought, okay, I can't imagine if there's something going on. But first shot is really interesting because it's a woman driving in the rain, and she's just in profile, and this is just one long, slow shot. She's driving, it's raining, the windshield wipers are going, the car stops, she gets out, the camera stays in the car, pans across to watch her walk slowly across a field, pull out a gun, and shoot a donkey.
Yeah.
Cut.
Yeah, and right now we should say there are lots of trigger warnings for this movie. If you are threatened, or you don't want to see animals traumatized, you don't want to see... Wow, there's so many. I don't even...
Yeah.
If you have a problem with needles, if you have a problem with with awkward
eyeballs,
sexuality, I mean, there's just so... Or toasters. I mean, there's so much to watch out for in this movie. You need a thick skin from the front. Maybe that's the deadpan reason, right? They had to go deadpan because everybody would freak out.
Yes.
No, I don't know. But yeah, so the donkey. So why... So if going with the mythology, if the donkey is a person who stayed alone, why did the woman shoot the donkey?
Maybe it's her ex-husband that she wanted to get rid of. I don't know. But I thought about that scene, and I thought it's doing a couple things. At least I hope. I think that it's sort of establishing the tone of just how absurd this film is going to be with why is a woman shooting a donkey? But then as you get to understand what this world is, what the sort of conceit is of this whole world about relationships and people becoming animals, then you're understanding, it's setting up, sort of establishing some rules that there are people and there are animals, and there's people that
are animals
become animals, and there's maybe some bad feelings between some of them. But it's to me, it's sort of dual purpose of this is going to be an unusual film, but it's also here's sort of something that may be a common occurrence in this world.
Right.
Our last shot is interesting because it's sort of a suspenseful moment. Where it's just the short-sighted woman sitting in a booth in a restaurant with traffic driving by outside the window. And that's it. And it's a very long shot.
Waiting for her partner to join her.
You're right. She's waiting, and we're waiting to see if he comes back or
if he makes the sacrifice to be with her.
If he makes the... Yes.
I initially I didn't think these were related, but you maybe think of them as contrast, right? So the first woman is someone who was scorned by a partner or a lover who chose or who was not able to partner with her. This is my interpretation, but was not able to partner with her, so he ended up as a donkey. And so she shoots him, right? There's that scorn. And in the second, we're talking about this extreme sacrifice to really try to make things work. So it's literally the opposite of what we've seen in the first shot, potentially, if we're objective about the relationships that they're trying to describe for us.
Right. And it does leave us hanging. And if you Google search the Lobster ending, there's, everybody has, their opinions. They've boiled it down to there's 3 possible ways that this could go, and they'll take their pick and try to argue, how they think it's going to end. Is, you know, does he just leave her? Does he go through with it? Does he return to her and say he went through with it, but because she's blind, he didn't really have to? You know, so there's all these variables, and it's like, you know, the question I think what it's really setting by not showing us that is to really challenge us and question us. Have we been paying attention? Have we really learned? How well do we know David? Because to me,
and how well do they know each other? I mean,
yes, exactly.
They're going to do this, and should they? You know, I don't know. There's just so many questions, and it's great. And usually in endings like this, I love endings like this. Honestly, I mean, it's what I watch movies for. You know, that's if you go back and hear our Mindbender episode, like, I love this stuff. You talk about Inception and the totem that's spinning. Like, did it fall down? Is it reality? And I love having that conversation. But I will say, for this movie, I don't need to know the answer, because I like considering all the possibilities. And I like asking the question even more than trying to settle on an answer, which is totally different for me. And that's why I really admire this movie, because it opened my mind to the possibility that it could be any of those things. And really, the question that stuck with me most is, does it matter? And that, I don't know, it's really impressive that this movie was able to do that for me.
Oh, I agree, because it's not one where I feel like I have to make a decision on how I think it ends, because to me it's really more about the journey and getting you to think back to, what do you know about these two characters,
right,
and how true is this relationship? I mean, is this David again trying to make it work like he did with the Heartless Woman? And, you know, I question, you know, she says she's the short-sighted woman. I wonder if there's some wordplay there.
Oh, it's got to be.
Short-sighted,
yeah.
Not only speaking to, you know, how well she can see, but being short-sighted in her decision-making process.
Well, and that each of them, that's their defining characteristic. So
yes,
the two of them are short-sighted, and then going to make this leap into a world that they can't even imagine to navigate. So
exactly.
Yeah.
So I think, I mean, it leaves you with something to discuss. So I think, you know, definitely a film that you sit down, you talk not only about the ending, but about everything that comes before that and what that means for these characters and for you, and how it causes you to reflect on your life, and to then extend into, as you said, you know, the multiple layers of metaphor of, you know, what do we take away from this, and how do we implement that in our lives?
Right.
Of, you know, what do we question? Because I think you have to look at these people, just assume because, oh, that's, you know, we're in the hotel and you've got all these things, so society says we're supposed to do these things, and, you know, what are the consequences of going against that?
Right.
You end up an outsider, but that's got its own set of rules. So it, you know, and you're bound by those. So you've got, you know, David, who's ultimately now possibly on the outside of both of those. So what does that mean for him? Does he have a place in the world? For us, you know, do we have to fit in? You know, why do we feel compelled to make the decisions we do? There's so many things to unpack in this film.
And for me, the takeaway is to embrace imperfection.
Yes.
Because there's no such thing. And I think that's, I don't know, I think it was beautiful in the way that it described that.
We could probably go on for hours.
Oh, I could.
But
I'm holding back right now.
But I think let's start to wrap it up here, and let's talk about Flickchart and Letterboxd. So typically we sit down and talk about where in our own personal flick charts this film has landed. Where is it placed? What's it below? What's it above? Sort of contextually, where is it falling? So I think we both really enjoyed this film. So
big time.
It's pretty high on my list. So I'm interested to see how high this one ended up on your list.
It's in my top 5. So and my total movies are, I've got 142. So it showed up as number 4 in my list. Now I'm going to list off my top 5 to give a sense of really where I am in movies. So the number 1 for me is Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, which kind of gets into this sort of a little bit of a strange thing, right? So with some similarities in terms of relationships, and then Fight Club, and then Inception, and then The Lobster, and then number 5 for me is Paranorman. So really kind of an interesting way to throw there, but really, I mean, I love this movie, and in a way that's different than the way I love each of those other movies, and that's why it's such a special place for me on my flick chart.
So it ended up at number 13 out of 224.
Okay.
So, and it's, if I tell you what it landed between, it's just so bizarre. So I'm going to tell you that, then I'm going to broaden out a little bit so you get a deeper sense. So it ended up just below The Goonies and just above Rogue One, a Star Wars story.
Okay.
So you're like, what is going on?
Yeah.
But if I back out to like 5, so 10 through 15, number 10, Terrence Malick's Badlands,
Okay.
The Martian, then The Goonies, The Lobster, Rogue One, and then Room at 15.
Oh.
And so if you look at where
There's some
Room
context
and
there.
Badlands
Yeah.
are there, it's sort of, I see some similarities there to that. So
Yep.
that puts it for me really in, at that point, I'm like in 4.5, 5-star range up on my letterboxd with this one.
For me, it's a 5-star film, and I think honestly, and it's more in reflection. I don't think I came to it even this time thinking it's 5 stars for me, but watching it again and really for me finding it to be flawless in what I think they wanted to do and how they executed it, and then how it ranked. It's definitely up there for me. And I think about on the main show when Pete and Andy are reviewing the older films, and what they do sort of postscript on each one is that they read Amazon reviews. And I can imagine what the 1-star or the no-star reviews for Amazon are going to be about this, because they're going to look at the deadpan stuff, they're going to look at it, and they're going to take that sort of confusion and that what the heck is going on here thing, and it's going to be really negative for you. If you don't want to be challenged, and if you are not comfortable taking the ride with this, if you want exposition, this is not a movie for you to see. But and there are going to be people that are going to trash this movie on Amazon because of that. But for me, this is exactly what I want to see the movies for, and I recommend everybody go see it. Now, we saw it in Amazon Prime. Is that where you saw it as well?
Yes, so it's available out there. If you've got an Amazon Prime account, it's available for streaming out there. I'm sure we'll have links to where you can rent it or purchase it digitally from iTunes and all of that. But it is currently available to everybody on Amazon Prime if you've got that set up.
Awesome.
So yeah, it's definitely, I think, an interesting pick for Valentine's Day. If it's maybe not a first date kind of movie, but
right.
I think it's something.
It might be a last date kind of movie. I'm telling you from experience. It might be, but it was great. It was great for both of us, actually.
Yeah, I think it's truly a unique film, and as I said, I'm looking forward to delving into other films of his and looking to see what happens next with him. I've heard rumors that I think Colin Farrell signed on to whatever his next film is.
Oh wow, that's great.
So I think we've got a director actor that have sort of connected, and so I'm interested to see where they go next.
Yep.
But for us, we here at The Next Reel say that when the movie ends, the conversation begins, and I've really enjoyed our talk about The Lobster.
Me too.
So now that the conversation's ending, it's time to start watching another movie. What have you got coming up that you're going to be watching next?
Well, other than our next film for the film board, which is going to be last week here in February, we're going to do Get Out, which is the new Jordan Peele sort of Guess Who's Coming to Dinner thriller type movie. And I'm super excited for that, but am really prepared to be terrified because everything I've seen about it sounds super scary. So that's the next sort of adult movie that I'm going to see. In the meantime, I am likely going to get dragged to the Lego Batman movie because coming out next week, and yeah, I'm a big fan of that franchise as well.
For me, I'm sticking in the sci-fi realm. I've got half my family hasn't seen Arrival
yet,
yeah. So we've 2 of us have, the other 2 haven't. So that's sort of one of those must-sees. It's now hit, available digitally. I think on Blu-ray, DVD soon. I think one of the great films from last year. Another, film that's going to challenge you to really think about things within that sci-fi setting. So that's I'm looking forward to seeing that again and actually watching my wife and youngest daughter experience that one
for
the first time.
Loved it.
All right. Well, JJ, it's always been a pleasure.
Yes, that's great. We'll see you next month.